na they believe in the absoluteness of itong foreign currency deposit act. Yung parang ganyan. So meron sila mismo meron pa ring it's not there's some ambivalence still.
Yung attorney, yun nga if there is a genuine debate and there's no clear answer to this, who will make the decision?
The ultimate arbiter would be the Supreme Court. Would be the Supreme Court.
But in this case, how will they treat this?
In this case, in regard to the non-reporting of the dollar accounts in the Salian law, that raises a legal point, which can be raised later on, assuming that the defense would question any conviction to the highest court of the land.
Okay. So parang it still goes to yung pang teorya ng marami na the Chief Justice is parang laying yung
yes, you're laying the ground for opening up a legal question that you can raise later on.
And you know what? It's also, I guess, an opportune time to talk about yung mga ilang questions rin na tinanong ni Senate President Enrile kay Justice Cuevas in the previous session, no? Parang may nakikita yata silang parang contradiction dahil habang nga lililitis itong si CJ Corona dito at nag-appear siya, patuloy pa rin yung parang question niya sa Supreme Court regarding the jurisdiction of this Senate impeachment court over him, di ba?
There was a question asked nga if he would therefore withdraw those petitions.
Because is his appearance in effect recognizing the jurisdiction of the Senate impeachment court? So, ano sa tingin mo dyan?
Ang tingin ko, at least he accepted the jurisdiction of the of the impeachment court over his person. But he is not waiving his right to question the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court over the subject matter, which is the entire impeachment proceeding. So I think that's the fine distinction that is impliedly made by his appearance, because yes, the Constitution says that I'm an impeachable officer and that you have jurisdiction over me as an impeachable officer. But as to whether or not it was proper is another matter, and that's a question I'm raising before the Supreme Court.
So how would you resolve siguro? I mean, these are purely talagang legalistic strategies and activities yan. And then yung sa pananaw ng basic just the layperson, yung nanonood lang, hindi naman nila naiintindihan itong mga technicalities na ganito.
Mahirap yan kasi ang sinasabi ng Supreme Court, ang Senado ang sole trier ng impeachment. Pero maraming nagsasabi, including Chief Justice Corona, because he raised this question before the Supreme Court, na hindi. Teka, sinasabi ng Article 8, Section 1, Paragraph 2 na pag nag-grave abuse of discretion ng Senate dito, dapat Supreme Court ang kuhan dahil sila ang pinakamataas na arbiter ng lahat ng question na legal, no? Yun ang implication ng lahat na ito. Now, napakahirap intindihin ng isang ordinary citizen. But when it happens, it's going to be dirty. There's going to be a constitutional crisis, no? What will the president do, for instance, if Corona is convicted? Will he physically call the armed forces to eject Corona from his seat there and appoint a new Chief Justice? That creates a question.
Going back to yung definition, I mean, even yung grave abuse, what constitutes grave abuse by the Senate?
Yes, ordinarily, any court of law, the basis for your grave abuse of discretion is by looking at the decision of the court of law. No, in the Senate, normally, what you would have would just be the vote. There's no compulsion on the part of the Senate to write a decision. Tignan mo dun sa Nixon, sa Clinton, natapos yung impeachment nung nagbotohan sila at panalo si Clinton. Hanggang dun lang, wala kang nakikita, walang ponente na nagsulat na bakit nanalo si Clinton, bakit kami bumoto ng ganito. Because, this is sui generis. It's a one of the earliest commentators about impeachment in the United States, Chief Justice Story, used the phrase exclusively political. And I was surprised when I read that last week. No, I was reading it. No, sabi ko, in their mind pala, it's exclusively political. It's not even qualifiedly political or quasi-political or a mixture of political and judicial. In the mind of the scholars about impeachment, it is a purely political question.
Okay, well, let me bring you back to a purely political question. Possibly a purely political question raised by the prosecution nga. Ano ba ang value ng waiver ngayon, given at this point? Kasi ang claim nila, wala.
Yeah, it's too late, sabi nila.
Pero sa akin meron. Now ang nasa kamay ngayon yan ng impeachment court. Tingin ko, mukhang magkokoko sila o nagkokoko sila right now, no? Papatawag ba nila yung mga managers? Dapat ba nilang kumpletuhin yung testimony para matapos na ito? So, I will stake a balance between what the prosecution is saying and what the Senate might do, which is to do everything within the week. There's enough time to look into those bank accounts.
Pero ang point ng prosecution, parang ano ba malalabas? I mean, ano bang masasabi ng mga bank managers na hindi naman, parang hindi naman pinabuluanan ni Chief Justice Corona in his testimony. Kung ano man ang lumabas dyan, it's still, inamin naman niya, for instance, yung dollars, hindi nga niya naman dineclare talaga for reasons already stated.
Alam mo,
ano purpose niya?
Kung totoo yung mga lumabas na report na pinakita ni Ombudsman Morales nung isang linggo, confirmatory lahat yan. And if I were the Senate, meron akong confirmation that takes out the question of grave abuse of discretion. Kung ma-prove mo lahat yan, no? Meron ng waiver, tanggal na yung mga legal questions about the AMLA report. Nakita mo yung mga nakita mo yung history ng mga deposits, yung paglabas-pasok. Na-confirm mo yung mga bank accounts. Meron ka ng documentary confirmation with no less than a waiver from the Chief Justice. So I'll be very satisfied, I'll be happy na when I decide, meron akong basehan na konkreto.
That it's in the impeachment court, the Senate impeachment court's interest to do that. It's part of the whole avoiding any claims of grave abuse of discretion. Dahil lahat talaga ay siniyasat.
That would strengthen the basis.
Well, yung ano naman, yung isa pa, ako, I'm thinking, from a perception point of view, pag malayong-malayo naman talaga yung dollar holdings niya from 10 or 12 million, I think yung publiko ay 200,000 lang naman pala or what is the amount? 600,000 supposedly yung sa PS Bank, di ba?
Totoo yan. Lalabas pa na defensive, lalabas na naman na defensive ang prosecution dito. 200,000 lang naman pala yan. Sinabi ninyo yun, 45 ang ganyang property, 5 lang. Ngayon, eto, 12 billion, ngayon 200,000. So, puro kayo gamitin mo yung street language, drawing.
Pero attorney, ang isa pang concern dyan naman kasi if, kunwari, ganun nga lang, but then they may have been viewed as defensive. Pero kung tutusin mo, kung binigay naman nila kagad, ano yung masaset nilang precedent na pwede nalang buksan ang bank accounts ng mga public officials na ganun-ganun lang?
Ay, oo, that's the whole, the ombudsman can cause the,
correct.
di ba? You can ask the AMLAC to open on any, di ba may talagang question talaga yan for the senator judges.
Mukhang maraming natakot na senador at congressman yan mukhang tinitignan nila. Alam na ba ng ombudsman ang aming bank accounts? Magagamit ba yan laban sa akin kung if I displease the powers that be? Well, that's a danger that has to be balanced by a that's why mukhang magkakaroon ng mandatory legislation after the impeachment to try to balance the powers of the ombudsman in a case like this.
So you think that there cannot be but an amendment because that it has opened up a very dangerous parang
I think they'll try.